Hello, everyone. We're back. So, our keynote address this evening will be from Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka. And here to introduce her is Mike Daniels. He is the director of the Student Multicultural Center here on campus. And also, too, his students have come and we've done programming for the Student Multicultural Center. And so, he's been an amazing contributor to the Textures exhibition, and we wanted to have him be a part of this also. So he's going to be introducing her.
Thank you, Dr. Ellington. Appreciate it. So that's actually a great transition into some of my reflections on the exhibit. It's more focused on what I've heard from students and the opportunity to engage with Joseph and Tamika during their talk when we brought our students here. Because that was my first time actually getting the chance to go through the exhibit, because on opening day it was so packed we actually didn't get to go through, so which is great. But we were able to take a moment to just reflect on not only the exhibit, but also just how all the work went into putting together the pieces that are represented here, and the thoughtfulness and the intention behind having each and every piece represented. So questions were posed by the students of, reflections of things that they wish they would have seen, or asking questions on why wasn't something there. And I think that led to such fruitful conversations around just the intentionality behind the pieces that were selected, everything from the actual artists who are in the exhibit and the artwork that's in the exhibit. And I thought about that, and to have folks who care enough to take the time to be intentional, how much time, regardless of COVID, how much time it took to plan it, to get the pieces here, to work with the artists that are here. And I started to have conversations with students afterwards, and they said that they appreciate themselves being reflected in artwork, number one, at an institution that they don't often see themselves reflected in the classroom. They don't see themselves reflected in the work that they're reading, right? The different authors that the books that are written by, a lot of authors that don't look like them. So to come to be in a space like this and be impacted by that beautiful artwork by internationally known artists, right? And to have those memories to walk away with, that while they were here as a student at Kent State University, how that's going to continue to really reverberate into the rest of their lives, and something that they can be proud of because of what Joseph and Tamika and all the folks here in the fashion program and the museum have put together for them. So I was truly appreciative to be a part of that. So thank you for helping us coordinate it. So I'm here to introduce Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka, I got you. Today, Dr. Afiya is here with us to share the history, how to be an anti-texturist. So being in love with hair her whole life, Dr. Afiya grew up as her family's hairstylist, graduating from lawn chairs at cookouts to eventually holding space in her college dorm room for a mini salon. Her trait of being a skillful, active listener translated smoothly to the field of psychology, earning her degrees from the University of Pennsylvania and Howard University. At the age of 26, Dr. Afiya earned a PhD in clinical psychology and was a full-time therapist at Columbia University. She is currently a professor at the University of the District of Columbia and has developed the theory and practice of psychotherapy, using hair as an entry point into mental health services. She has trained hundreds of people in her techniques, including barbers and hairstylists. Dr. Afiya is a natural hairstylist and partners with Natural Hair Studio in Silver Spring, Maryland, where she loves creating art with locks, twists, and afros. Dr. Afiya is a contributing author in the Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair catalog, and has published several book chapters and journal articles on research. So please welcome Dr. Afiya.
Greetings, everyone. I haven't been in public in a long time, so I'm gonna need you all to talk to me. This is my first presentation post-COVID, or we're still in it, but in the past 2 years, so I vibe off of energy, like really. So I know we met through Zoom, some of you, but the energy I welcome. But I wanna practice some of my language skills. So I want to practice based on the places I've been to in Africa. So the first place I ever went to in Africa was Ghana. And there, amongst the Tree-speaking people, we would say, Wohota saying. You want to try it? Did I say it right? Was good? Okay. All right, the next time I went to Africa, I went to Nigeria and stayed with a Yoruba family. And there we would say, Bawo ni. Perfect, you got the tones. It's a tonal language. The next time I went to Africa, I went to Kenya. And there, amongst the Kiswahili speaking people, right? That's a language spoken all over. We would say, Habaragani. Remember that from Kwanzaa, right? And the last time I went to Africa, I went to South Africa. And there, amongst the Zulu, we would say, Sawubona. But I'm from New York, so what's up? So I do want to begin by expressing extreme gratitude for being invited to participate as an author for the book, but also to come and speak today. Dr. Ellington, your tears are in that carpet. In that walkthrough today in the tour, you're like, this made me cry, and this made me cry, and so I just know that part of you is remaining at this university. And so it's interesting because my bio needed a little update. I resigned from my university a few months ago. And so negotiating what tenure looks like, I had a whole Nicole Hannah-Jones moment. But in terms of negotiating tenure as a Black woman who studies Black women and just the challenges that come up with that. And just thank you all for all of your great work and dedication. And two, I want to shout out some psychotherapy people. You know, so Donella is actually a certified psychotherapist. So she completed a 12-hour course on how to use hair as an entry point into mental health, as well as Brittany. You know, those critical questions, yes. And then Cam, who's gonna present tomorrow, is actually a part of my research lab as well. And then two, I think some people online. So shout out to all the people online. Okay. All right. But before I begin my presentation, I do want to get permission from an elder to begin. So I want to follow African cultural rituals. Do I have anybody who thinks they're older than me? Okay, thank you. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about how to be an anti-texturist. Now y'all know that book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, was so popular, right, during this pandemic and violence against Black people and all of just negotiating social politics. We have to recognize the role of hair in racism as well. So that's the dedication of this work today. But I want to give some milestones for myself. So in my bio, right, I was in those lawn chairs, right? That was my first salon setting. And so I do want to give the origin of my work, psychotherapy. When I was a college student, I was a psychology major. And so I remember talking to my Aunt Brenda on the phone one day, she's now an ancestor, and telling her, should I study psychology or hair? And she said, well, why can't you do both? I don't think she meant do it at the same exact time, but that's the way I interpreted it and thought, I can do hair and therapy together. So that's the origin of psychotherapy. And when you get your PhD, you could just start making up words, right? Psychotherapy, you know. And then from 2011 to 2019, this was the primary time where I really started to collect data. And the data that I primarily use for my research is narratives. I use people's hair stories or their history of their hair to be able to map together their identity, which is an internalized and evolving story of themselves. And so I have a research lab at Howard University and the University of the District of Columbia, where I train lots of students. And then from 2019 to 2022, I primarily have been doing these psychotherapy certifications. Again, a 12-hour course where people are actually practicing and applying some of these skill sets to the hair care process. And then two, I had the honor of contributing some of my research to the Crown Act. So the Crown Act stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And so I never imagined that lawn chair would lead me to I think I was standing outside of Cory Booker's office in that picture, but just in terms of being able to testify, I think in 7 states for the Crown Act. It didn't always pass. South Dakota, Wisconsin. All right. So this proverb, I know we've been using proverbs today, but no matter how far the river travels, it never forgets its source. All right. I know you all know the name of this hairstyle. Just shout it out real loud. All right, great. So it's kind of like these little buns that we have in our hair, but who are the Bantu people? Now, I bet you all can answer this, but in terms of really understanding, the majority of, I guess the Bantu people are the 2nd largest ethnic group in Africa. So Bantu is a language that is a common culture, family practices, rituals, but we don't know as much about them, right? But considering that there's such a large group on the African continent, the majority of our ancestors, people who were stolen and taken to North America, the Caribbean, and South America, come from the Bantu people. So I would argue that the majority of people in this space who identify as African American, Caribbean American, are actually Bantu. So it's interesting, we might not remember, but our hair will never forget. I like to say that Africa always comes back. Every 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, Africa's gonna come back, right? So to recognize, so should I start a stand-up career? Okay, that's good material, okay. All right, so the objectives for today. I hope to braid together West and East African hair rituals, detangle the cultural historical traumas that have created texturism, and twist together tools to honor Black beauty. You see what I'm trying to do with the words here? Okay, well, I told y'all it's my first presentation in 2 years. I'm just trying to get some energy. All right, so we have to really understand how much our heads play a role in our identity, right? Giving a checkup from the neck up, right? I'm a clinical psychologist and a hairstylist. I do a whole bunch with right here. And so to recognize that there's so much information that can be communicated about someone based on just their head alone. So the appendages of our face can be manipulated for decorative purposes, such as deep scars, holes in the nose and ears. Who in here has a nose ring? I'm not gonna ask about other parts, but, or flattening the nose, stretching the neck. I'm sure we've seen the necklaces that stretch, or putting circular plates in the ears or in the lips. All of this has social meaning. It could be connected to attracting a mate. It could be connected to ritual. And here we can define ritual as Sobonfu Some and Malodoma Some do it. Ritual is how we prepare our mind, body, and spirit to receive a blessing. And so there's something that we do with our faces and our heads that we prepare ourselves to receive. And then social status, right? It shows how much money you have or maybe where you're from, all these different pieces of information. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna talk about it, but do you see the similarity here or is it me? Right, so just to even recognize what can you tell about someone based on how they decorate themselves and how they adorn themselves. 2, to really recognize that we can read so much into the textures of people's hair and even their skin. So for example, this is a Nuba woman who engaged in a scarification process to indicate that she finished weaning her first child, so that she's finished breastfeeding. And so it communicates to her community, I'm very fertile, I can reproduce, and where she's from, having a lot of children is considered very wealthy. And so this is an indication to people who see her that she's been initiated into motherhood, and that enhances her sexual appeal. And then here is an Igbo man who actually has scarification on his face to honor deities, particularly related to the sun rays and God in that way, and even his hair has that same coil look to represent, again, the lightness that comes from our spiritual realm. So today I'm gonna talk a lot about rituals. And here I wanna honor the Maasai. I feel like they do amazing things with hair rituals. And forgive me for not having citations on these pictures. Don't say I'm plagiarizing, but Google. In terms of, even in the hallway, we all saw some Maasai images, but they did an amazing job of continuing their rituals. So this is actually a baby naming ceremony. Who in here has been to a baby naming ceremony? Okay, a few of us have been there. So, Dr. Essel, you've been to a baby naming ceremony? Okay, I was about to say. And so at this baby naming ceremony, they wait about 7 to 10 days before they give the child a name. It's for a few reasons, things like infant mortality or waiting for the community to come together, or even waiting some time to see the child's personality. Because have you ever looked at someone like, you don't look like a Stacy? It just don't fit, it just doesn't match up. And so they want to see who this person is. Because in a lot of traditional African societies, in your name is inscribed your life's purpose. And it's inscribed your journey. And so for me, Dr. Essel, what does my name mean? Afiya. Yeah, it's Friday bone. Luckily, that I was born on a Friday. My parents didn't know that because they were using the Kiswahili version, which means health. And so anytime someone is calling my name Dr. Afiya, they are reminding me why I was born. They're reminding me why I was born. So Dr. Health, huh? And so I would love to even know, do you all know what your names mean? Okay, Dr. Ellington, what does your name mean?
For a long time, I hated my name because Tamika is a very popular Black name, and I wanted to be called Lauren. That's what I wanted to be called. I don't know why, but that's what I wanted my name to be. Like Lauren Hill? Yes, yes. But Tamika is Japanese in origin, and it means people. And so when I learned about my name, I said, that's exactly who I am. Absolutely.
Wow. Do other people know what your names mean? What does your name mean? First daughter of the father who is a fierce warrior. Ooh. Okay, there's snaps. I heard you, Brittany. Yeah. That was other people. Do you know what your name means? You could do a quick Google. But yeah. It's the smallest grape of the vine. The sweetest too, right? All right. So again, thinking about this, but even with this baby naming ceremony, they actually shave the baby's head and the mother's hair as a sacrifice, as an offering for the safe journey of this child from the spiritual realm to the physical realm. And with that, they're given a name, oftentimes after a really honorable ancestor, a family member. Who in here is named after somebody in their family? A middle name, a first name. Yeah, my middle name's after my mother's mother's mother. So to even think about that person had good character and wanting to continue that on. And the two, just the Maasai warriors have like the dopest hair, right? Just so beautiful. And they dye their hair such deep red colors, evoking that warrior energy like blood and fire, to really bring that on. And two, part of their initiation into warriorhood is they have to grow locks, right? They have to grow locks. So we can tell that the person over here has been a warrior longer than the person to the right based on the length of their hair alone. And so to recognize, there are some other controversial initiations, like they have to collectively kill a lion. Now, I'm not talking about kill a lion and put it on Facebook with their leg on top of it, but this is actually to protect their community, because in this part of the Masai Mara, let's say, that there are lions. And so how do you work together as a collective without guns or certain weapons to actually protect your community? But what's interesting is when a Maasai warrior has completed his time fighting, he has to get his hair shaved. Who do you think is the only person in the entire community who's allowed to shave the warrior's hair? Mother. Their mother is the only person. And so you can, if you look very closely, you can actually see milk dripping down his face. They shave his hair with milk. And so the mother will take the hair, go to a river or a lake, and do a blessing that her child is released of any stress that they experienced during that time of fighting and protecting the community and family. And so imagine we did this ritual with our veterans, that when they returned from war, from duty, if we came together and bathed them and shaved their heads, I imagine there'd be a lot lower rate than post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Lower PTSD. Or imagine we did this with our brothers who were incarcerated, and when they returned, we bathed them, we cut their hair, we welcomed them back. I think there'd be lower rates of PTSD too, because the things that are happening in American prisons are extremely traumatic. And here are a bunch of beautiful brides throughout the continent. Here's a Maasai bride. On her wedding day, she did something I did not do. She shaves her hair. And so if you think about it, Donella, Do people tend to get a haircut when they have a breakup or divorce? Okay. All right. So we tend to change our hair with our relationship status, whether it's dyeing it or getting a new hairstyle when there's a breakup. I actually have a publication in the Journal of Black Sexuality that highlights Black women tend to get a haircut or dye their hair red sometimes, in particular, after having a breakup. So I'm not sure with that, but maybe it's charting back to ritual. And the woman in the middle is a Mauritanian woman who, this is her wedding day. Instead of guests bringing cards or gifts, they will actually do the bride's hair, putting different beads and pendants in it. Each bead represents a wish for the marriage, whether it's wealth or lots of children, but again, braiding it into the bride's hair. And on the right is a Tuareg woman of today's Mali and Niger. And she is getting her hair rubbed with fine black sand and medicinal oils to increase its luster. Yes, they're rubbing her hair with sand to make it shinier. And so there's only one person in the entire community who is allowed to braid her hair on her wedding day. It's the blacksmith's wife. So if you've ever seen blacksmithing, it's very hot. There's lots of banging going on. Is everybody over 17 in here? Okay, because they want that to happen in the marriage, that it's very hot and lots of banging. All right, so even thinking here, it's not only how we style our hair, but how we adorn it, right? So we could see that that's a whole bunch of bottle caps and a watch band, and then the woman on the right, she has some serious cornrows. Okay, was that too corny? Was it too corny? I like Angelique. I gotta have you at the next presentation. Okay. See, that's your purpose. But I want to really identify how our hair products are so critical to our health and wellness. This image over here is from ancient Kemet, or ancient Egypt. So Kemet meaning land of the blacks. And so when someone was having a health-related issue, they would go to a traditional healer and they describe their complaints. Oh, I have a backache or my stomach hurts. And based on the description, the healer would actually put together a hair product of animal fats, oils, different plants, and apply it to the person's head. And due to the heat of the sun, it would actually melt into their body system. If you don't take anything else away from this conversation today, write this down, write this down. This is my personal belief. I'm still working on it. Anything you put on your hair or on your skin, you should be able to eat. Again, anything you put on your hair, I know, Donna, it's not totally true. I know, but ideally, because when things are applied topically, they oftentimes can enter your bloodstream faster than if you were to ingest it and to go through your digestive system. So just to be mindful of the products that you're using, right? I know this is controversial, but in terms of thinking about the purest or healthiest things that hopefully you could pronounce on the label. But I'm saying this in the sense that even in the hallway, right, we saw a Himba woman from Namibia and the clay and the butters that they are applying to their hair and scalp. I feel like Carol's daughter should be selling this product in terms of how healthy it is. I know at the salon that I work at, if someone is having a lot of breakage with their hair, we will actually do a clay treatment, right? We will cover their entire scalp with clay, a few drops of essential oil, and put them under the dryer for a little while and wash it out, and they report less breakage. So some say it can actually be detoxifying the hair and the scalp, right, in terms of the attraction of the clay, or others say it could be filling in some of the holes in the hair cuticle. So to really think about how are we involving the earth to be our medicine. So I would love to know, just for a second, what are some of the products you all are using that are edible? Mm-hmm. Okay, aloe and coconut, those are common. Yes. Okay, she got special herbs and stuff she put in there. Any appointments open tomorrow? Okay. Anybody else? Brittany? Ooh, that's a good one, but it smells, but it's very good for cleansing. Anybody ever use avocados? But you have to be careful because you'll have a whole guacamole in your bathtub after, so you have to be careful with the cleanup. Dr. Essel, I want to know, what are you using? Oh, nothing beats shea butter. Rice water. And okay, I know you all know the answer to this one, but I'm just going to ask, what is the only thing that can moisturize hair? Water. All right. So if you have some water, please take a sip right now. Woo. I told you I haven't been talking. My mouth's getting all dry. All right. And so something that was really emphasized, if you went on the tour just now with Dr. Ellington, is that our hair is so spiritually significant. Our hair is the highest point on our entire bodies and therefore the most connected to the divine. To some degree, our hair is like an antenna and can pick up on other people's energy. These women here are from the Tikar people of Cameroon. And so this hairstyle actually is supposed to replicate that of an elephant. Do you see the trunk? Okay. And so just thinking about, there's lots of rules and rituals too. Okay. How many of you all growing up did your mother say, don't let anybody touch your hair? Right? And I don't even know y'all, and your mom said that to you too. So to think about there's some rule, why were they telling us that? Okay. She just went right to it. The spirits. Okay. Why else? Dirt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even the handling, the dehumanization process, right? Almost like we're animals to be pet or touched. And this is our bodies. That's like somebody coming and touching somebody's butt, right? Danella? Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Shade to that. Mm-hmm. Working some root. That's your DNA, right? That's your DNA. So what do they say to do with it, though? What do they say to do with it? Burn it, bury it, flush it down the toilet, right? So no one could have access to your energy, to your DNA. So to even think about these rituals that I just met you today, but I heard those same things. So to think about how is it possible that your ancestors and my ancestors had the same rituals? Well, maybe we're Bantu. But too, I even want to give a shout out to Dravidians in terms of recognizing that both of these people are actually from India, but in terms of Rasta hair, right? To think about that, the longer and thicker your hair was, the more likely spirit could enter your body. And so these rituals and the textures, right? We don't think about people from India being black, but they black, y'all. So this actually was Dr. Taylor's title, right? The proverb, when your sister is your hairdresser, you need no mirror. So this was something that we discussed. Oftentimes in ancient Egypt or around other places at other times, you actually had to be initiated into a priesthood to be able to do someone's hair because it was seen as that sacred, right? And in Yoruba culture, this is your ori, your spiritual center. And if somebody's going to touch you there, they need to be initiated in understanding how spirit works. And there's a humongous comb culture. We had the honor of seeing some of Willie Morrow's combs in the exhibit. If you haven't, definitely check it out because each one has its own embedded message into it. And you could tell a lot about what was going on in that particular location at that time based on what the comb was made out of. Some combs are made out of bone, some are made out of wood. But a lot of things that I've been reading about is that you could actually use the comb as medicine, meaning that if someone was having a financial issue, like they wanted more money Anybody else want more? Okay, I could use some. Money, that they actually would get a special comb made. The person would get their hair styled with a comb and they'd end up getting more money. Or this is actually a fertility doll. So if someone was having difficulty conceiving, they could actually request a comb made that had a fertility doll on the top. They'd have their hair combed and they'd end up getting pregnant. So to think about how stylists were basically blessing people through doing their hair. And here is just so much variety of hair that can happen. So thinking about offering to do someone's hair in Mende culture is actually a sign of friendship, because you know you're going to spend hours and hours and hours with that person getting your hair done. Or for the Yoruba, every single girl is taught how to braid hair, but anyone who shows particular talent becomes the master braider. Let me say that clearly. Master braider, I didn't say something else. Master braider, and is responsible for everyone's hair. Or even in Senegal, I've heard that stylists and barbers are inherited, in terms of you go to the same barber or stylist that your parents went to, and to some degree they become the griots or the jollies, keeping all the stories of your family that get shared in the salon or barbershop space, right? Okay, see, Donnell's like, I can't tell those stories. But she was telling us earlier what people were saying about Will Smith. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. But what I really want to emphasize is there's not one type of African, right? And there's not one type of African hair, but what's common amongst them all is that every single strand is beautiful. But unfortunately, one of the first things that European slave catchers and masters did was to shave the hair of their new human cargo. I just spent all this time, and how much time do I have left? Okay, I just spent all this time describing all the different rituals in terms of religion and age and fertility connected to hair, and within seconds, destroying that connection. And so the book, 400 Years Without a Comb, is an excellent resource in understanding how when Africans lost connections with their hair care practices, they lost a lot of connection to their culture. And so oftentimes hair was called wool or fur, right? Slaves were made. And hair was actually used and weaponized to make people develop a slave consciousness. And so oftentimes we see enslaved Africans with scarves or hats on their head. This was not a fashion statement. This was out of utility and protection. Oftentimes underneath the hat or scarves were scalp disease, lice infestation, parasites, balding. About 47% of Black women today experience hair loss at some point in their life. 47% today. So to think about the rates that were back then in terms of poor nutrition, stress, and so recognizing what actually was happening to the hair and scalp. And plus, we didn't have all of our tools. We didn't have our special oils. And so oftentimes enslaved Africans had to use things like horse brushes and tools that were used for sheep on their head. But depending on the plantation, Sundays sometimes became the one day of the week that enslaved Africans were permitted to groom their hair, and styling it and then covering up for the rest of the week. But two, I really want to identify how much a caste system was developed based on hair texture and plantations. Oftentimes people who had looser curls or lighter skin were delegated to domestic tasks of being in the house. Or if you had more tightly coiled hair, oftentimes more manual labor and out in the sun. This is a woman from Martinique. And so depending on where you go in the Caribbean, you know that there could be like 30 different classifications for race. But oftentimes how hair was used as part of that classification. So I think that the identity this person would be labeled with is caprice, which is basically having one Black parent and one Indian or white parent. Like it's all these different, like, but then they have, so it's all these different categories. But I don't want to paint the idea that there's field Negro and house Negro and people were so split and divided. That's a lie, right? It's a lie that Black people didn't have connection even on the plantation. A lot of the literature from Jamaica, for example, says that the people who were working in the house, enslaved in the house, would actually be listening into the conversations, right? Okay, master's going away, or master's sick, this, that. And based on how they wore their hair was communicating to others whether or not this was a day to run. And oftentimes, even in Jamaica, they would do an undercut and write messages into their scalp to be able to communicate where to even go. Or maybe you've heard of the Maroons, the Sea Maroons, the Quilombos. So these were enslaved African people who were able to escape from boats or plantations to have African sovereignty in other lands, whether it's in mountains or even in the swamps of Virginia. Sometimes we think we had to run all the way to Canada to be able to get free, but people were actually able to find sovereign spaces in forests and woods. But why this image is here, and I'm sure you've seen it before, is that this is a group of black girls with various braided hairstyles, and this is a map from the 1700s. It said that people would actually braid maps into their hair to find freedom. And it's so tactile, right, based on their texture, that they were able to find freedom because they could feel it, right, at night or running by themselves. Okay, I need to turn left at the mountain, right at the river, and actually feel it. And if they ever got caught, what would happen? They would take their braids out. They were destroying the map so that whoever got free could stay free. Our ancestors were geniuses, that they were able to figure out how to use their hair to find freedom. Can we get snaps or claps or something for it? But black hair has been policed for hundreds and hundreds of years, especially in this country. So for example, the Tignon laws in Louisiana in the 17 and 1800s, it actually was illegal for black women to show their hair in public spaces. Some say because their hair was so ugly and unattractive, while others say it was a method to control the desires of white men who were so attracted to the black woman. But y'all, if you give an African woman some fabric, what's she gonna do to her head? Okay, Danella's pointing. They were making the most Erykah Badu style head wraps that they're like, okay, now that's illegal. We don't want you to do that, because people couldn't replicate the fashion and the style that they had with these fabrics. And two, we have to give special shout outs to Annie Malone and Madam C.J. Walker. Who in here saw the Self-Made series on Netflix? I didn't like it. It was so historically inaccurate. If people just followed the history, it was so much more exciting. It would be so much more exciting because they both have such interesting stories. So Annie Malone is the predecessor of Madam C.J. Walker, who oftentimes doesn't get a lot of attention. How much time did you say I had? Okay. Okay. But I want to give a special honor to these ancestors in terms of Annie Malone was a scientist. She studied how chemicals interacted with each other and actually developed a product called Poro. And so she named it Poro after a secret society in Sierra Leone. The Poro basically highlighted when these women would go out to forests or beaches to initiate from girlhood into womanhood. And they would say when the women would come out of the water after about 6 months of being away from their family, they had the most ornate hairstyles, and they thought that the water deities were styling their hair. And that's what she chose to name her product, right? That a spirit must have done that because it's so beautiful. And so Madam C.J. Walker worked for Annie Malone, right, in terms of who came first. And Annie Malone is not known as the first black millionaire because she gave so much of her money away. There are still parades in St. Louis called the Annie Malone Parade, or orphanages with her name, because she gave so much money to black communities. And then Madam C.J. Walker, born with the name Sarah Breedlove in the 1860s, she was the first person in her family to be free. Both of her parents died when she was about 6 years old. They were sharecropping but had significant health issues. So she moved to the Midwest with her sister, where she became a domestic. She cleaned houses, she did laundry. At the age of 17, she was married and had a child, but her husband was actually killed, murdered. Some people say lynched in a race riot. And so imagine being 17 years old, your husband was lynched, you have this child. She was extremely stressed. And what happens when somebody's extremely stressed? Her hair started to fall out. And so she says that she had a dream one night, and an African man came to her in her dream and told her, if you want to grow your hair back, you have to get this very specific plant from Africa. So she woke up, she did the research, was able to find it, ordered it. It came several weeks later, and she mixed together different recipes in her kitchen and applied it to her hair and scalp, and it worked. It grew her hair back. And so this is her story that she tells in terms of marketing the product, but she shared it with her family and friends because, like I said, in a study by Yolanda Lenzi in 2019, that 47% of Black women experience hair loss at some point in their life. She had a big market for it, right? It wasn't just about hair straightening, it was about healthy hair and hair growth. And so her company had such a unique framework. She paid the people who cleaned the bathrooms more than the executives in her company. She said it's harder to clean a bathroom than to sit through meetings all day. And so at the time of her death in the early 1900s, she employed over 100,000 Black women. Even Oprah doesn't do that. Or Michelle Obama or Kamala Harris or Ketanji. Okay, but to think about how she used hair as an economic empowerment point for Black women, especially during this time when, again, people were mostly domestic. And then who's this brother right here? Malcolm X, right? He went by lots of different names. Who else can give some different names for Malcolm X? Malcolm Little, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Detroit Red. Now, why was he called Detroit Red? Tell me why. Well, one, he was from Michigan, and so people just, Detroit. And then second, he had red hair. Malcolm X had red hair. And so sometimes they say don't show these images where there's no color because it makes it seem like it's so long ago, but he had red hair. And so if you've ever seen the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee or read the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley, you know he references hair a lot in connection with his consciousness, right? In the movie, the first time you ever see him in the entire movie, he is getting his hair straightened, right? Conked, right? And so what happens when you get that on your head? It started burning. It started burning real bad, like kicking and stuff. He runs to the sink, washes it out himself, puts a towel on his, I'm saying him like I know it's Denzel Washington, but puts it on his towel on his head and pulls it back real slow, and he says, "Look white, don't it?" Whoo, he was happy. He was happy. But if you know the story of Malcolm X, you know the people who murdered his father, who triggered his mom and hospitalized her for mental illness, who said he couldn't be a lawyer. It was white people, like these, he identifies specific characters. And it's so interesting to me as a psychologist when someone abuses you or hurts people in your family, kidnaps you, but then you fall in love with them. What is that called? Remember, it's a Stockholm Syndrome. And to what degree do Black people in this country have Stockholm Syndrome that's represented through their hair? Thank you, Dr. Ellington, you got the spirit. But to recognize, again, we actually manifest some of our traumas through our hair because our hair is the most easily manipulated part of our entire bodies, y'all. You can change your hair every day. Maybe a wig, but you can change your hair every day. You can't change your skin color every day. You can't change your facial features every day. You can't change your weight every day. COVID, you can't change your weight every day, but you can actually change your hair every day. And so to think about how that holds a lot of our stress and trauma. I don't know about you all, but I never read about in the Emancipation Proclamation that you got 40 therapy sessions in a mule, right? That the trauma that we face for hundreds of years was never addressed. And again, where does it show up? Oftentimes through our hair. But yeah, just continued special shout outs to African freedom fighters throughout the globe. For example, Karima Muthoni for the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. So when Kenya was fighting against the British to gain independence, they grew locks, right? There was an undercover army, the Mau Mau, where they were taking people out. And so there was a woman who rose through the ranks, Karima Muthoni, and she said, I don't really believe that the British is allowing us to have independence. She said, I'm going to go live in the mountains until the British stop controlling our economics, our entertainment, our education, our labor, law, politics, sex, religion, war, health. Do you think she's come down from the mountains? No, she's still up there. And she said her hair represents the politics of Kenya, trying to put white at the top and Black at the bottom. And then, you know, there's some revolutionary roots. In the 1960s and 70s, people went from being called Negro and colored to Black and African. And with that change in consciousness, there was a change in aesthetics. A big slogan of the Black Panther Party and other groups was Black is beautiful. Can I get a quick Black is beautiful? Black is beautiful. All right. And just, again, we oftentimes don't think about the women of the Black Panther Party who made up the majority of the members, and doing interventions like breakfast program that now the actually U.S. government has instituted, because you recognize there's a huge relationship between what we're eating and our ability to think critically. All right, I just threw that in there. Who watched the Oscars, or at least saw a clip of the Oscars? I think every single person saw a clip of the Oscars. You didn't see. Good for you. Good for. I didn't. I was sleeping when it happened. But in terms of, I did see the beginning of it because was staying in my parents' house. There's this concept: he who controls images controls minds. So the Oscars are basically rewarding the people who were the most manipulative of our consciousness, right? The best actors, the best lighting, the best dress that pulls you in to believe in it. But I thought it was interesting because the Oscars opened up of a live performance in what town? Compton, right? And Beyonce did this beautiful performance, but I kept watching the whole time like, wait, why is everybody else in braids and she was in that? I was curious because lemonade braids are Beyonce's signature look. I'm like, she likes braids, but it just makes me think about the business of Black hair. To get that hair that Beyonce has costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money okay, one of my students at Howard once said, and you all can tell me if this is a lie or if it's true, she told me that Beyonce has this farm in Asia where she feeds these women really like lots of avocados and stuff, and grows their hair, and then she takes their hair. Okay. But anyway, but to think about the price and the cost of maintaining a certain look versus braids, something that our mothers did for us for free. And so recognizing just even the cost that goes behind that. So was getting into hair typing, but I just really want to argue that this should be flipped. Why is straight hair number one? Why? But to even think about how that gets into our consciousness. 5 minutes. All right. Can I do a psychological experiment on you all? Do I have informed consent? I won't hurt you. I won't. I don't think I'll hurt. Minimal risk involved. So what I want you to do, I'm gonna tell you a word, and I want you all to repeat it after me and go faster, faster, faster. I'm gonna put my hand up like this to tell you to stop. Then I'm going to ask you a question. All right, I'm gonna give the directions again. I'm gonna tell you all a word, and I want you to repeat it over and over, faster and faster, faster. I'll put my hand up like this to tell you to stop. Then I'm going to ask you a question. You have it? All right, so the one word I want you to say is top, T-O-P. All right, ready? Top, 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 top. What do you do when you see a green light? All right, thank you for your honesty. For the people who said stop, what do you think that was about? Because there was a real pause too. The go people were like, go. But I know you want to say stop. So why do you think you said stop? So you were conditioned. That happened like in 2 seconds, right? What happens when it's a lifetime? What happens when it's a lifetime? So even I kept priming you, because did you hear me? I said stop 2 or 3 times. I'm like, stop, stop. Remember when I said I'm giving? So I actually was priming you. Then I got you to rhyme. I got you to say something so fast that it wasn't making you think. But what happens when we're saying straight hair is number one, straight hair is number one, straight hair is number one, straight hair is number one? You're going to say, what's number one? Straight hair. Or some people might be like, go. So again, thinking about how to actually be an anti-texturist, to question yourself, question these systems that orders hair texture in this way, right? In terms of understanding that everybody in this room has a hair texture, right? That we're able to some degree categorize ourselves in a letter number sequencing. But it's grades, right? An A, a B, or a C, a 1 or 2 or 3. And to recognize that the more curled or the tighter the pattern is the worst grade, the lowest place. And so just to even think about how do we reintroduce this and to understand the purpose of hair texture, it's to protect our brains. depending on where your ancestors were developing and growing, that they actually needed a way to ventilate the brain system. If your ancestors are from a cold environment, you needed your hair to be straight so that it could cover the back of your neck, protect the brain stem, right? Versus if you lived in a very equatorial climate, you needed, and I'm challenged with the word kinky, because it has like a sexual, I prefer tightly coiled. But to think about that's a ventilation. So it was your brain's air conditioning system, right? To make sure the air got in. So all that is to really think about this concept of texturism. So texturism is a preference for hair with smoother, looser texture, and the discrimination against people with tightly coiled hair within the same race oftentimes. It's oftentimes intra-racial. And when it comes to curls, looser curls are idealized and fetishized for its proximity to Eurocentric standards of beauty or beautiful, good hair. And so for us to really, again, see a connection between texturism and racism. For the Crown Act, for example, why it's a big thing right now is that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 didn't cover hair. It said you can't discriminate against someone based on their race. But hair is a part of our race. But that was a loophole. Okay, but you can't wear those braids, those locks. And so to think about the forms and just this concept of hair stress. So hair stress is a psychological concept defined as physical and psychological effects of persistent improper hair care and styling. Black hair is trending about the same time every year, right? This year was Jada and alopecia. Last year was Tessica Brown and Gorilla Glue. But to think about what happens when we are forcing our hair to do something it doesn't want to do. Maybe your hair doesn't want to be purple. It might fall out. Maybe your hair don't want that Jerry curl. It's gonna like, I'm leaving, I'm out. It's like, just put a SpongeBob meme, like, all right, I'm out. But to think our hair will let us know what it can and can't tolerate. But to even think that, some of our ancestors use these techniques. So Josephine Baker, instead of putting Gorilla Glue, she put eggs in her hair to create this look and the aesthetic of having like this perfect shine. But I was looking, I'm like, this is the same exact hairstyle, right? But we went so hard on Tessica, went so hard on her. That actually ended up having to do a public therapy session with her for a conference, just for her to like share her side of the story and the trauma that she experienced. But to really be mindful of language, like laid edges, right? We know what that is. But Beyonce said, let it shrivel up. Or snatched edges, to think about what we're talking about in terms of pulling basically our hair out. There is something called trichotillomania in psychology, that it's an anxiety disorder where someone pulls individual strands out of their head. But to what degree are we engaging in the same practice through our hair care techniques? There's a whole bunch of tools for it, right? In the hallways or in the exhibit, we saw maybe older traditional tools, but these are some of the tools now that we're using to manipulate the texture of our hair, whether it's a diffuser, or edge brush, or a rat tail comb, or a hot comb, right? Now it's just plugged in versus putting in an oven. Yeah, just thinking about hair discrimination is so rampant in terms of being punished for these textures. So I even wanted to introduce my concept of psychotherapy in terms of the lay health advisor model of training stylists and barbers and making mental health assessments and interventions, having therapists based in salons and barbershops, having group therapy in those spaces, and just having psychoeducation materials. But Dr. Ellington, I feel like we have to have an exhibit in some salons too. Think about what we could be putting up. And just even web-based interventions, because I know a lot of us, especially during the pandemic, didn't get our haircuts or done, and we were doing it ourselves, but those influencers, so sort of being able to promote wellness messages. So I'll wrap here and say the path to having healthy hair is strong roots. Thank you so much for letting me present to you all today. Here's my Instagram, my personal email, and website.
We have time for a few questions. I'll pass the mic around and we'll lock you in at the podium.
Excellent presentation. Awesome. Very energetic, informative. Loved it. So I want to start off. Yeah, you're right. So awesome. Oh, what did I say? I meant to say informative. But, and so I'm trying to make sure that my bias is put in check, but I just want to ask, because You showed the curl, well, you showed several curl classifications. And I'm biased because I'm author of one of them. Co-author of one of the classifications that you showed.
What, you Andre Walker? No.
Don't quite have his money, but I want to know, how would you rank it? Because as the degree of curl gets tighter, it's usually more simplistic to start at 1 for straight, because
Why?
you can't
Why
get
is that?
because you can't get your curl when it doesn't have curl is straight, and so you start at number 1.
Why?
Because
this is what kids do. They just keep saying why. Okay, I'm just gonna keep asking why.
Oh, that's fine. Because as it starts to curl, then you start to increase the number to represent the degree of curl. Because if you start, you don't know what the tightest is when it's at 1, because there are several degrees. So how do you know how to do that? I would like to know your recommendation.
Well, when
So
you said
why?
degrees,
So
yeah.
let me ask you the question, why?
Yeah, when you said degrees, it just made me think about like 360 degrees, like in terms of starting from that, like having the circle and 1, like, I don't know if there is rank in the degrees of a circle, if that makes sense, in terms of where the starting point is. I'm very mindful of our educational system. Can you all hear me okay? Because when I stepped closer, it made a sound. Okay, I'm very mindful of the educational system. So for example, I'm a clinical psychologist, and when I give an assessment for an IQ test, I'm gonna give you one of the questions on an IQ test. Don't say I'm breaking confidentiality. One of the questions is, how many continents are there? Now you all like, should I say it?
Stop.
Okay, so, so what are the continents? And what is a continent? What's the definition of a continent?
Landmass.
Yeah, a large mass of land surrounded by water, right? We learned that in 2nd grade. So is Europe a continent?
It shouldn't be.
By that definition. A large mass of land surrounded by, it would be Eurasia, right? But Europe has been the center of history. Why are we centralizing that space when it doesn't meet the criteria of, like, it's the teacher contradicted themselves in the next sentence, and these are the continents. So I'm just saying in terms of having an orientation, in terms of even where the prime meridian is, why do we start right there? When it's like 359 other places we could go. Like in terms, does that make sense? Yeah, just being the center of it. So I think like it can be easy, like this is a straight line that, this is the degrees, but to think about what would it look like to actually say this is the curliest possible hair that can exist, and everything else is a derivative of it, which it is. Or it could be, right? So I'm just thinking about how to center even something as like, but it's science. But to recognize, just like what Dr. Underwood's presentation was, there's still a gaze. There's still a cultural component of science, of this is science or it's not. Even with COVID stuff, like this is science, but even people are like, well, what is the CDC recommending now? So to even think about, we can still question it. Remember, were you all spraying down your groceries? I know I did. But now it's like, I probably was eating Lysol, which was way unhealthier than probably getting COVID at the time. Like, so to even think about, like, I ate Lysol. Not bleach, but Lysol.
I was just curious, can you hear me? Okay. I was just curious if you do, with the numbering, how you do from 1 to 4, see 4. If you started with the curliest hair as number 1, that is the most pattern, the most circles, however you want to say it.
Number 1
and
textured hair.
as you decrease in having a pattern or a curl or a loop, if you get down to 4, that's closer to nothing. So you would have the straight hair at the end. So if you started with, does that make sense?
Wait,
if you started with instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4 and having the straight hair as number 1, you could just do the reverse. You could have number 1 is the 4C curliest hair. It has all the patterns, the curls, the loops.
All the patterns.
A little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, to get down to a straight piece of hair which has basically nothing.
Yeah, if you ranked it in the curliness of it, this is the curliest hair that exists. Does that make sense? Just to question the typing systems and orientation.
So what Dr. Afiya I believe what she's trying to get at is the fact that straight hair is number one is because of status, right? The natural hair movement, after Andre Walker came out with the alphanumeric system, the natural hair movement actually adopted it and picked it up. People started making all these videos about their hair, saying whatever classification of hair that they had. And what I noticed, and what a lot of people noticed, is that people that were 3A, 3C, whatever, those were the ones that were the most popular. One is a status symbol. And I think Dr. Afiya is just trying to say, why does that have to be number one? Why does that, why does it have to be number one?
So that's just my whole thing. If you ever read the How to Be an Anti-Racist, it's just questioning policy, right? Yeah. Why in a school policy does it say no locks? What does that do? Does that impact the way the child's able to think if there's locks on their head? So just to, again, orient towards that.
And to go even further with that texture, I hate the curl key is what it's called, because it's so many different, it's so many different ones out there depending on the product line you use. But most women think they have 4C because the world has told them that's the most difficult. And because they don't know how to do their hair, they all think, oh, I'm 4C. But if that didn't exist, would they even claim to be the most difficult texture, right? I mean, everybody thinks they're a 4C, and it's like, no, you just don't know how to do your hair.
And then, too, even thinking about porosity, sometimes that's left out of the conversation, where that can have a huge influence on product choice and how your hair responds to moisture. So just factoring these now.
Several comments. I'm moving back. The next question I'll pose, well, we get the next one, is, so what is your advice on how to be anti-texturist if you don't even have textured hair?
Everybody has a texture.
Right, okay.
So I would go into that in terms of that is a type of texture. I think sometimes, even in class, but I don't have a race. It's like, yes, you do have a race. In this race-based system, we do have one. So I think just in terms of identifying, that's why I even was like, you're on that chart, right? To identify a type.
Well, yeah, so kind of relating to the question that he just asked, I do think it just kind of goes back to your own questioning of your belief system, because even with my own hair process and journey and understanding why do I have these biases, I didn't start wearing my natural hair until freshman year of college. I was straight hair until that, and you could not. I remember one day I had to go to school in 8th grade with my natural hair, and I cried because I was like, this is horrible. And it took me years, and I'm still learning that. But it's rooted in all of these outside factors that we sometimes don't even think about. Whether it's even our own family members saying your hair is unkept. I wear my natural hair now, and I still have aunts who are like, why is your hair like that? Why aren't you straightening it? It would be so much prettier if you straightened it. So it's there's still so many things that are still being thrown at us every day that are making it you want to change, but it's kind of hard to change when there's still things around you influencing you to think a certain way.
Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that, because I think even to Dr. Underwood's question, I don't even think I'm anti-texturist. I'm still working through it, and I think that was even part of my introduction of psychotherapy. This is psychological and it is a process. It's a process. So thinking about from 8th grade to your first year in college, that's a long time to wrestle with how you value yourself, right? And so I think it's an ongoing process, just in terms of just being anti-racist. I'm sure I'm still participating in some really racist thoughts and techniques. Yeah, and so I think in terms of identifying, actually I'm texturist. And I realized I was, okay, safe space, right? I realized I was texturist where the salon I work with in Maryland they wanted to follow someone who had gotten braids and to say, how long can a braided style last? By day 60, I'm like, take it out. Like, it was bothering me because it was like, it looked matted and then braids coming out of the mat. I'm like, why? And so I even contacted the owner of my old salon. I'm like, why would you put that up there? Like, and I'm like, whoa. And I said, I think I'm texturist. Like, I had that moment because it bothered me that she wouldn't take her braids out and left it looking like that. Yeah, but why is it a problem? And then the owner was like, well, she was pregnant. She just didn't want to touch her hair. She was putting scarves on it every day. So she just said, I'm not touching my hair. I'm like, oh. But I had a reaction. So I recognized in that moment, I'm like, ooh, why did it bother me so much? And I think that's why I was asking Crystal, why, in terms of getting into, like, what is the origin of these thoughts? Why in the 8th grade did you cry when you had to wear natural hair? What was so painful? What were people seeing? What were you seeing that hurt that much, that would cause you to feel so deeply? So that's kind of just getting into the why. I don't know if there's a final destination.
So I love all of this, of course.
Okay, come on with it.
It ain't that deep. It ain't. But this is that deep. And one just point of connection I wanted to make between multiple talks, but also the exhibit, and especially, this keynote, is the importance of this kind of decolonial gaze and thinking, and sort of allowing ourselves to reorient ourselves around the logics of Black hair, of hair in general, but specifically through the pathway that Black hair presents. Because if your hair doesn't grow down and it grows up and out, it grows round and not straight, it's asking you to think differently, and to reconstitute what is, what can be, what is possible, going back to the earlier presentation. And so I think this was a phenomenal keynote, even across the diaspora, across these identities and cultures, to think differently about how people come together and how traditions are passed down, rituals. And I think if we translated that more into some of the more rigid spaces like sciences, we could potentially begin to develop new logics, because even the idea of classifying hair on the basis of curl as opposed to any other of the many diverse categories that exist, we have to even question the questions we decide to ask or the categories we decide to create. And I think this was perfect and wonderful and beautiful, and especially as a compliment to so many other great presentations that I think captured lots of parts of this that ask us to look at ourselves differently, look at each other differently, and build new logics that may not have been instilled in us.
Ashe. Very well said, and it makes me think about the work of Ron Eglash. Have you all followed? He does a lot of work around fractals and mathematical equations and algorithms using parting patterns. And so I read the book recently by Emma Dabiri. It's not called Don't Touch My Hair. It's called Twisted. Have you heard of that book, Twisted? And so in the last chapter, it's about Afrofuturism. And so she brings up like how Black hair can solve all these genetic issues with understanding DNA and curls and parting and fractals. And so I said, let me look up this person, Ron Eglash, because it sounded so interesting. And when I did a search, he was referencing my work. I was like, what? So for a full circle moment, I am entering it as a psychologist and a hairstylist, but him as an educator and mathematician was referencing the way that I was conceptualizing. So in terms of that interdisciplinary piece of understanding the culture that influences science. So we're gonna have a lunch and learn too, cause we work together, Chris. I'm like, that's why I think that there's even more expectation for you, and I'm charging you with this, right? In terms of thinking about how, with your genius, how you can influence the way people think about themselves in the 8th grade, right?
Hi, thank you for your presentation and talking about hair. My husband listens to me on the hair tip. Like, I go through a different phase. The past month and a half, I did braid outs and twist outs and no heat and all that stuff. And so I did a talk with Sister Circle back during the pandemic when we were like in the quarantine phase. Sister Circle is a group on campus, an initiative out of the Student Multicultural Center that supports women of color, our students. And so the topic was all about hair and hair care and all that kind of stuff. And I challenged, and I'm gonna ask you the same thing, natural hair, that term. Growing up, for me, I always heard natural is when you don't have a chemical treatment, right? So you don't have a relaxer or a perm, that's your natural hair. And I was like, so in my mind, I've always been natural because I've never had a relaxer or a perm. And I don't like when I show up in a space and people assume that I'm not natural. I have to wear it in my kinky state, my curly state, for you to believe I'm natural. And then I struggle with that. Like, do you think that I think a certain way about myself because I'm wearing my hair straight? And how do we combat those notions that I'm not straightening my hair to look more white? I like my hair like this. I like it in braids. I like it in a twist out.
Why? I'm just doing the same thing. I'm just doing the thing. Why do you like your hair straight?
Because it gives me a different kind of freedom.
Why does it give you freedom to have straight hair?
I just don't have to put as many products in it or braid it at night or, wrap it a certain way.
Why is time a factor in doing your hair?
Got places to be.
to work?
Yes.
So
to work
capitalism.
Or anything. But how do we combat that notion that when we show up in a space, we can't all just celebrate each other and however we choose to wear our hair and show up? Because for some of us, it's not as deep as it used to be, where I was trying to fit in, but no longer am I trying to. It's my preference.
Yeah, I love the way that you are constructing your identity, right? In terms of that our hair is an extension of who we are, and it's a language system. And by looking at everyone in the space, we can make certain assumptions about who they are based on their hair, but also those could be we could be missing the cue. And so I'm very mindful of how fluent everyone is in hair language, just like reading people, and how our choices. I think it's beautiful to have choices. I think that there's so many different possible ways that people can wear their hair. Even in this room, you all should see what you all look like, beautiful. But everybody has their own unique experience. But I'm mindful, kind of even what Dr. Ellington said in the news program, the percentages. Why is it 60 to 70% chemically straightened? Why is that? And so just getting curious about why on a particular day did you want the braids? And why on another day did you want it as straight as it possibly could get? Why? What was happening internally that led you to say, I need to express myself in this way today? What conversation are you having with other people that's nonverbal, that's happening in that moment or during different phases or stages in your life? Because that's what I thought too during the news program. I'm like, why? I kept thinking, why? Where is the preference created? Is it something that's recent? Is it something embedded from your earliest memories? Does it have, Easter Sunday, my mom used to straighten my hair, and I just love that feeling because it brings me back to that moment. So just to be curious, why? Does that make, am I? Okay. Here.
I don't want to take us off the curl pattern conversation, but mine is a little bit more related to psychotherapy. Okay. So I love the term. I think that's phenomenal, and it gets at what I feel like, especially in our culture, is very important. The places that we end up in where we are the most vulnerable for so many reasons. One, it's somebody's in our hair. And then the other piece is the ability to have somewhere to share things that are going on in our lives and know that somebody's listening wholeheartedly because they truly care about us. So I wonder, barbers, hairstylists, these people that we trust with our deepest, darkest secrets, the challenges we have going in our lives, and they care enough to listen to us. When you're in the space as a mental health specialist, licensed to be able to do this work, how you're able to challenge notions of white supremacy and systems of oppression that talk about mental health, especially in black communities, in a way that is at a deficit approach, and take away the power from those folks who are in this space, giving us a space to be vulnerable, as if because they don't have a license, they shouldn't be doing some of the things, shouldn't be making recommendations, and almost don't have the training to do it. So I just wonder what that's like to push back and give power to the folks that are, you know, some of our most trusted, because we might not go to a clinical health specialist. We may go to the salon to say what we need to say. So I just wondered.
That was such a thoughtful question and commentary too. Here, according to research as far back as, not far back, but let's say 2010, I think I saw an article that about 50% of black clients never go back to therapy after their first appointment. There could be a variety of reasons, right? But also there's research saying that it's more likely that a black woman has ongoing hair appointments than doctor's visits. What is happening in those health spaces that's so off-putting? And are people being misdiagnosed or not feeling heard or cared for? Are they being prescribed some medication that made them feel worse? And so I think that the hair care industry is much more culturally informed than the mental health industry. And this is coming from someone who went to Howard for grad. Like, I wanted to specialize in black mental health, and even then I felt like I had to learn a lot of things outside of school. So even thinking about the work of Dr. Amos Wilson, no class ever talked about Dr. Amos Wilson, but a famous mental health professional, that he argued that there are economic benefits for this country when black people have mental illness.
We can end on that one. We can end right there. All right. We are over our time.
Sorry.
No,
Thank you all. This was amazing today. I'm so excited that you all came to be with us today. We look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. And so we'll be back. The museum will open at 9 a.m. We'll start our presentations at 10 a.m. And did you have something you wanted?
And definitely come back for our second keynote. Dr. Crystal Porter is going to be talking from a very scientific standpoint, and I think the two keynotes are really going to complement each other. Yeah. And again, please share this. The entire thing's being live streamed. Your friends from anywhere in the world can click and observe. So get some rest, get some dinner. See you tomorrow.